Welcome to Lakers Roundtable. I'm Mark Medina with the L.A. Times Lakers blog, and the Lakers are playing an otherwise nondescript basketball Tuesday night against the Charlotte Bobcats, the worst team in the NBA. But there's one storyline that has nothing to do with the game and has everything to do with the never-ending intrigue surrounding these two stars. Kobe Bryant is currently leading the NBA with 30 points a game. He's trying to maximize his play and championships in his final years with the Lakers. And meanwhile, Michael Jordan is currently the Bobcats owner and the former Chicago Bulls star. And of course, they always draw never-ending comparisons. And here with us now to talk about them is longtime Laker author Roland Lazenby. He's currently working on a Jordan biography titled MJ: The Life, and it's planned for a 2013 release. How you doing today, Roland?
I'm doing great, Mark. How about you?
I'm doing great, and, I know that you've been busy working along with this book that's about to be published sometime in 2013, but I think a lot of Laker fans have noticed your recent tweets on Lazenby, and a few weeks ago, one of those tweets was something interesting about what Michael Jordan said to you. You had an interview with him for your book, and you said that MJ told you that Kobe Bryant is the only one to have done the work to deserve comparison to what he's done. And I know there's obviously been these endless comparisons between those two and their storied careers, but just what was your immediate reaction after hearing Michael say those words to you?
Well, I was pretty excited, one, that he had agreed to sit down with me for about 20 minutes. And then I was excited that he was willing to discuss these things. And I was a little surprised at the enthusiasm he showed for Kobe, but as he talked, he pointed out that they played in the same offensive system for the same coach. And so he was interested. And, of course, this actually, the conversation came during my early developmental work for the project. And it was probably 2.5 years ago. I was with him in Orlando. And this was while Kobe was in the process of pushing the Lakers to that run of finals appearances.
So you said that you initially were surprised to some degree. Why so?
Well, it used to be very easy back in the 90s. Well, not very easy, but much easier to get some time with Michael. But once he went to Washington and he became a figure who had so many or so much public relations handling, there really weren't many occasions just to visit with him. But because I was in Orlando, he was there, obviously, for the league function, and he was sitting up at the top of the arena by himself, and I was probably about 10 rows down. I've known Michael a good while. I pointed to my recorder and asked him if he had a little time, and I was lucky. He said, "Come on up, let's talk."
And with those comments that he made about Kobe, you said that also surprised you. What was it that surprised you about that to some degree?
Just that he was as forthcoming. He was actually fairly. He defended Kobe quite a bit. He said it's silly for people to criticize Kobe because he apparently copies some of the things I do. He said, that's what everybody does. He says, I came along copying David Thompson at the University of North Carolina, Julius Erving, different people. He said players pay attention to the people who came before them, and that's sort of a natural process. But he pointed out that Kobe was different, as I said in the tweet, because Kobe had done the work. He was very aware and had taken great interest in Kobe Bryant's great work ethic. As you well know, Michael Jordan's work ethic also is legendary. And he said Kobe had done that work to deserve the comparison. He said he's the only one who's done the work.
Now, to follow up on those lines, I'm going to read the original tweet that you wrote about that. You wrote, Kobe's ultimate competition is MJ. That's why MJ watches him. MJ made people think what he was doing wasn't human. Ditto the Cobster. What did they do, both of those players, that just made us all wonder if they're actually human or not?
Well, for Jordan, the initial thing was that he could fly. But it was also this energy, the way he attacked. And it just was something that had not been seen before. His ability, the hang time, all those things that generated all of the media and just captured the imagination of a worldwide audience. The NBA had been around a long time. A lot of great basketball had been played, and the global audience had been largely indifferent. Of course, television had increased some with Michael Jordan, but clearly his performances and the way he played, those things were very different. Now, Kobe really wasn't this guy who was, he could do all these trick things. He didn't quite have the flight component Jordan did, but he had, I was just watching some video the other night from 2007. Kobe had that monster game against Portland of 65 points. And Kobe's had so many of those games, and he's attacked the game with such enthusiasm, and he has cared at such a deep level from the time he was 17 years old entering the league. Both of them really just almost have this superhuman approach to playing and competing. And I think that's what distinguishes the two of them.
Speaking of Twitter, you also tweeted recently that you're starting to hear that Lakers general manager Mitch Kupchak may leave the Lakers. How likely do you see that happening?
Well, I think some of it's going to be determined by things that happen this spring with the team. And I'm not entirely clear on that. Honestly, I hadn't given this much thought, and I went on a radio show last week with Matt Money Smith, and and while talking with Matt on the show on Fox Sports, he brought up the point that he thought that Mitch was probably on his way out, and it occurred to me that was a pretty unusual thing. And of course, this was on air. And later, actually, one of my old sources sent me an email about it. And then after getting that second email, I started thinking a bit, and then I contacted another one of my sources. And Mitch plays his cards very close. And I don't think anyone can answer that definitively. But I think the perception for at least some people who are at least have a good look at him and what he does inside the organization. I think some of them are wondering and speculating in that direction. Now, I'm quickly learning my lesson with Twitter. I was on an L.A. radio show, a network radio show, and people were discussing, it was brought up. And yet suddenly I mentioned on Twitter, I had all these caveats that, this is just talk, that's not, and the thing still goes viral. And so it leaves me wondering. I also had seen, in my internet research where some people had already discussed it previously, I can't quite figure out why Twitter has taken on the character it has. But just like my Kobe Bryant and Michael comment, I've actually written a magazine story on that, and I've mentioned it before on Twitter, and it never went viral. And yet when I did it the other day, the thing just blew up. And so I'm not quite sure what to think. I do believe that a lot of people out there are in sports media, and I think they're looking for things that they can start discussion with. I think it's a harmless thing, but boy, it really can get a lot of things going at once. I really didn't, and I probably was naive in this, I didn't think it would, the thing over Mitch would blow up the way it did. I assumed it was already sort of being discussed. I was asked about it on live radio, but boy, it took off.
Right. But I think you said in one of your tweets, regardless of whether this would actually happen or not, it's still telling to some degree that discussion is actually being talked about.
And that was my point. I think that, these things, we really do keep an ear to the ground in covering pro sports because these things come at us in bits and pieces. By the time the press conference is held, things have long been reported. And when you're watching a sports team and covering it and observing it, you do try to keep your ear to the ground for those things. I will tell you that my thought, actually, out of this was that this is a very difficult time for the Lakers. In the past, I've been a pretty good critic of the current administration. And, I actually was doing some tweeting there about how fans ought to be patient and that this was going to be a transition. And, boy, it just got going in the opposite direction in a hurry.
We're speaking with longtime Lakers author Roland Lazenby. You can follow him on Twitter to read those tweets at Lazenby, and he's currently working on a book on Michael Jordan titled MJ, The Life, which is due out in 2013. And back to this whole discussion regarding Michael and Kobe. As you very well know, Kobe is currently on the NBA's all-time scoring list with 28,503 points. 93 behind Shaq, and obviously that's a whole storyline in itself. And then Jordan stands in third place with 32,292 points. And I bring this up because, just drawing from my own reporting, one time last season I asked Phil Jackson, among all the players ranked above Kobe on the scoring list, if he particularly sees one that Kobe wants to surpass the most. And immediately Phil said Michael Jordan. Later on, Kobe gave us that signature glare when he was asked about Phil's comments and said he doesn't matter. And obviously you know the two very well and know their hidden agendas. Which one are you more inclined to believe regarding that?
Well, I think that probably Phil was speaking. It put Kobe in an awkward situation. I know that after I spoke with Michael about him, I mentioned it to Kobe, and his ears perked up just like a kid. He immediately got excited and wanted to know what Michael had said. And I think obviously Kobe has tremendous regard for Michael Jordan. That's sort of there are not many people out there working in the territory they've worked. And so Jordan is sort of a beacon out there on the edge of the envelope, or whatever you want to call it. And I think probably Kobe frowned because, yes, he very much wants to approach Jordan's record, but I don't think he wants to offend him in any way. I think that Kobe treasures any attention he gets from Michael Jordan. I don't think that's uncommon. I think players throughout the generation have admired Michael and, of course, craved his attention. In some cases, like Kobe, craved the opportunity to compete against him and to match up against him. And people treat Kobe the same. I mean, there are players coming along. One of the things I did tweet, I think it's unusual. I'm starting to get questions now from fans. Who do I think is the next Kobe Bryant? And so there's the cycle to all of this. They sort of have a cycle of their own, I guess you would say. Though there are other great players, of course, but they are just these driven sort of attackers who have come out of the game the way, who have operated in the game the way Tex Winter and Phil Jackson defined it with the triangle offense.
It seems to me to some degree, and I know that Kobe and Phil have expressed similar sentiments at certain points, that always having this discussion and comparing Kobe and Michael is almost in a sense unfair, because Michael was so extraordinarily talented, and that, to measure Kobe's career and accomplishments just in that context with how it compares to Michael somewhat diminishes Kobe's and what he's done for the game. Did you agree with any of that?
Yeah, I think there's some truth in that. I think Kobe has been so eager, and he's expended so much effort and and trying to fly up near the sun where Jordan roosts, that his own accomplishments sort of get lost because they're always sort of defined in terms of Jordan. I think that was more a factor early on in his career. I do think that Michael Jordan is a great player, possessed of tremendous determination, tremendous ability and strength. I've often recalled Tex Winter telling me that when he first started dealing with Michael, he was already a retired coach, having been through a lifetime of coaching, and he was awed, speechless at Jordan's level of talent. And it took him a while to where he actually felt comfortable talking with and dealing with Kobe Bryant's great talent, and compared it to Michael's as well.
So, Roland, I want to mention something interesting you wrote in your book, Mad Game, the NBA Education of Kobe Bryant. And obviously this is written when Kobe was just starting his NBA career with the Lakers. You related an anecdote at that point when you were talking with Kobe, where you passed along Michael's phone number along to him, and you asked Kobe, what question would you want to ask Michael the most? And he mentioned, I would love to ask him how to incorporate math into the game. I was wondering, in what respects did he mean by that?
Well, Michael always said, I could score 20 points in my sleep. You'll get 5 and space it out 5 a quarter here, and over the course of a game, it all adds up. And there's a certain calculation that greatness requires, because it's not just 20 points. Michael was speaking about being older, but Kobe is an aggressive and ambitious scorer, and Michael was the same. And I think that it really goes right to the heart of that issue.
There's also a scene later on in that book where you paint a picture about their early matchups, and Kobe is constantly asking Michael during the game about some of the different nuances in terms of how to post up effectively and whatnot. But the main feedback that Kobe said stuck out to him was Michael telling him, you've got to stay aggressive. Why do you think that resonated with Kobe so much?
Because there's no one really who could offer that advice except Michael Jordan. And, they are similar, but they are not the same players. As Tex Winter often liked to point out, Jordan's strength, and Kobe, of course, they both became stronger over their careers, but in the comparison, Jordan was this kind of guy who could get position in the post and hold it. Jordan is one of the greatest post weapons in the history of the game, despite the fact that he's not a post player, a center or a power forward. But he's a great post-up scorer. And Tex always remarked that Kobe quite didn't have the strength and the center of gravity, that Kobe was a very fine post-up player. We've all seen it from him. But he could get shoved off the block a little more easily than Michael. Otherwise, besides a few differences here or there, and this goes back to your earlier question, I think Kobe has defined himself by this singular pursuit of this agenda of the Jordan legacy. And in some ways that does cause him to be overshadowed. But Kobe clearly has staked out a lot of territory that is his own. And I think in some ways his drive and determination is every bit that of Michael Jordan. And I think that is unique. And in some ways it probably eclipses that. There is no question that the game preparation, the effort that Kobe has gone to from the time he was 17 years old, No one comes close to that. Not, and Tex would say not even Michael in that regard. And Jordan worked very hard.
An interesting tweet that you had earlier this summer came in the context of the NBA lockout and the owners and the players' positioning, and Michael, being the Bobcats owner, had made comments about there needing to be more support for small market teams, and obviously that resonated a huge reaction. Some among players who thought that it was somewhat hypocritical for Michael to say that, considering his background as a player. But from your tweets, it seemed like that you were supporting Michael in the sense that he wasn't selling anyone out. I was wondering if you can explain that a little bit.
Of course, Jordan is the central operating partner of a franchise that is losing $20 million a year. He is no longer a player; he is an owner. And he is involved in those negotiations to work better deals for his business partners with the Charlotte Bobcats. If he had been involved in those negotiations in some other capacity, that would have reflected a zero integrity in terms of his position. The fact that he so well represented his co-owners, it was something lost on the public at large, but Michael was actually displaying tremendous and vital integrity in trying to get the best deal he could as an owner. That is his very serious obligation, and if he had neglected that, he would have zero credibility as an owner.
From your conversations, I know you're fairly limited with talking about the book, but just from whatever you can share, what do you think in his eyes have been some of the challenges with becoming an owner?
Well, the things that have worked against him since he stopped playing, the things that made him great as a player, make it tough today. He has all the competitive drive, all the ego, all the testosterone, and the things he has to do as an owner require that he temper those things. And that's very hard to do. If you possess those gifts, they sort of drive you, whether you're on the golf course or sitting in the owner's box or at the negotiating table. And it's a lesson Michael has to learn. I think it is. I admire him tremendously. I think it's remarkable that he's come into North Carolina and put his money and time into rescuing that franchise, rescuing the NBA in his home state. It's not something he had to do, and I think there are probably plenty of times that he wonders why he's doing it, but he is doing it, and I think it is something I admire. He has a long, tough slog to make that a better franchise. He's got to draft well. That's not his personal strength, but he's getting there, and so he's not in an arena where he can, or in a field where he can dazzle the world as he did as a player. But I think he's determined and dedicated to see it through. It's going to be a long process. And so I admire that. It's not easy for him. There are nights, I was thinking when I was down there the other night, where the team's really not playing well, not particularly competitive, and Michael's almost, that building almost becomes a cage for him. He handles that well. He doesn't let it get him going as much as he used to, but it is a challenge.
Those are the thoughts of longtime Laker author Roland Lazenby, who's currently working on a book on Michael Jordan titled MJ the Life, and that is due out in 2013. I'm looking forward to reading it, Roland, but in the meantime, appreciate all your time and perspective as always.
Great questions, Mark. Thank you for taking the time with me.